Hey folks, quick reminder before we start today's episode. Yes, I've officially joined the Lions of Liberty Network, and I am pumped to keep that rolling. Meaning you can now catch brand new episodes of The Brian Nichols Show every Thursday over on the Lions feed, but don't worry, Mondays and Fridays are still right here on the original TBNS feeds. Now, looking at today's episode, today we are breaking down why the Democratic Party's strategy is collapsing in real time and why their sudden "we want to talk to Trump voters now" moment just feels a little too desperate. So, with that being said, let's jump into today's episode.
So the average Democrat is more likely than the average Republican to not want to talk across the aisle, to
why is that?
It's difficult to know exactly. I don't fully understand the reason why. I'm speculating here. There is data that people on the left tend to be less happy. Maybe that has something to do with it. It's, sort of anecdotally, like when I talk to people in journalism or other fields that have a political divide, after Trump was elected, you did see that the Democrats were the ones who kind of decided to leave conservative spaces.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another fun-filled episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by, yes, the best heart health supplement in the world. So if you want to learn how to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. We're going to talk about more of Cardio Miracle in today's episode. But first, oh, you poor Democrats, you are suffering right now in the court of public opinion. And with that, you see all the leading Democratic voices begging the public to give them a second, a third, a fifth, a 35th chance. I don't know. But right now you have folks like Gavin Newsom, who's going out doing podcasts, trying to recruit folks on the right side of the aisle to enter into conversations. You have folks like AOC going across the country saying, hey, if you voted for Trump, I want to know why. You have folks like Stephen A. Smith, who he's saying, hey, I'm just the dude, and I think the Democrats have gone off the deep end, and maybe I'm going to be a voice of some sanity and some common sense when it comes to the 2026 and then 2028 presidential elections. So right now, the Democratic Party, they're definitely between a rock and a hard place. And let's talk about not only why that is, but what course of action might actually help bring some of the Democratic establishment back towards, I don't know, what do we want to call it? Like sanity? That might be the right word, but let's discuss that. Joining me here today on the Brian Nichols Show from Young Voices is Joey McFadden. Joey, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
I'm simply fabulous, as my father would say. How are you?
Doing quite well, my friend. Looking forward to today's conversation, Joey. Let's do this before we dig into the Democrats and the goofballness that's happening behind the scenes there. Introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience and give us a little bit of context in your world, in this world of politics, and kind of what your perspective and approach is.
Well, I was a contributor with Young Voices. Now they've accepted me to stay with them in the long term as a writer and commentator.
Congrats.
I also am the managing editor for the Substack of the New York City Alliance of Braver Angels, which is an organization devoted to political depolarization. I'm an assistant at Upward News, and I'm a freelance art critic. I've written for journals like Fair Observer and Modern Age, and I'm a contributor at Queer Majority. So I've got a lot of intellectual stuff going on. And back in March, I wrote this article about Gavin Newsom's new podcast, where, I talk about how he's kind of shifting with the times to adopt a more let's talk across the aisle sort of approach. And, he's sort of unawakening himself. I don't think he's actually quite literally changing his policy positions that much, but he's trying to appeal to people's sensibilities a little bit more, recognizing that people are not big fans of, far left progressive identity politics. And his podcast has embraced people like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. I was just looking at, I haven't been keeping up with it too much, but I was just looking at some of his more recent guests. And, he's also had people on there like Scott Galloway and Rahm Emanuel and Ezra Klein, Tim Walz. So, it's not just right-wing people that he's talking to, but I think he's decided to try to embrace the new media environment in a context where you're not just going to exclude the right. I mean, even progressive podcasts like Pod Save America have moved in a direction where they're trying to have more conservatives on their show. I mean, this is something that one of their hosts, I don't remember which one, I talked to Bill Maher about a few months ago, where he said, like with Bill, he realized that he wanted to actually have his show be a space where you're having discussions with conservatives instead of just shutting them out. So, but that's sort of the time right now, is that's what people want to do, is talk across the aisle. You see, I think there's a great hunger for that right now among the public. And I think that people would rather have that kind of depolarization attitude than a sort of extreme left identitarian attitude be kind of culturally hegemonic, which frankly, I think wokeness is no longer culturally hegemonic. And I think that's a good thing.
Is that why you think there was such a desire back, and I would say over the past 10, 15 years, to isolate, right? To say, we're not going to talk to that type of person, right? Is that kind of where this mentality manifested? And obviously it really reared its ugly head in 2024 when the Democrats got a big slap in the face with the reality. But is that kind of the mentality that's been in the more democratic, progressive, left-wing politics over the past few decades?
Well, I think that the average, so the average Democrat is more likely than the average Republican to not want to talk across the aisle, to
why is that?
It's difficult to know exactly. I don't fully understand the reason why. I'm speculating here. There is data that people on the left tend to be less happy. Maybe that has something to do with it. It's sort of anecdotally, like when I talk to people in journalism or other fields that have a political divide, after Trump was elected, you did see that the Democrats were the ones who kind of decided to leave conservative spaces. So like scientifically, I don't know the reason for that, but more Democrats don't want to talk to the other side than Republicans, statistically speaking. But if you look at the percentages, there's still pretty small minorities, I think maybe 10 or 20%. Most people, most average regular people, do want to have discussions with the other side. It's like the exhausted middle is like 80% of the population. But I do think that for a long time, there was a lack of understanding and appreciation of conservative thought across most of the Democratic Party, which is just unwilling or unable to even comprehend conservative ideas and just call them racist or something without appreciating the meaning behind what many people were saying. But most people were not, I think, that close-minded. I think it was mostly people in elite spaces and maybe some people who were really, really politicized.
I wouldn't even say closed-minded necessarily as dismissive, right? And I'll use a real example. So my buddy Jeremiah, he hosts a show here in Indiana called The Boss Hog of Liberty, and his studio is right there. I can actually see his microphone from where I'm sitting. And every now and then I'll be a guest on the show. And the last time I was on a guest was back during the election, and I was on the show, and the producer for the show, Zach, he added some commentary during one of our conversations about why certain Trump supporters were supporting Trump. And he's like, well, I don't know. It's because they probably think that they're going to get X, Y, and Z. And I said, hold on, time out. Don't dismiss their concerns, right? Because this is where your average person says, fine, you're just going to put me into a box. You're going to dismiss my concerns as, oh, that person only has this concern because they're an ism, right? They're exhibiting racism or anti-Semitism or name the thing, sexism, instead of just saying maybe, just maybe, there are very real issues that they are looking at and trying to figure out real tangible solutions. And when we look at the more left side of the aisle, for the past few decades, especially, it has been, you're not allowed to present a solution that doesn't toe the line of this hoity-toity, highfalutin type of mentality that a lot of the elites had, especially on the coasts. If you were in California or if you were in New York, right, during the pandemic, you saw this on full display. Oh, we can't have the lessers around us. Oh, they could give us the ick, right? We need to separate who's essential. and who's non-essential, right? And while those non-essential workers were being, quarantined, pun intended, right? All of a sudden, you're seeing businesses close. I had a good friend who had a great restaurant in Philadelphia within weeks closed because guess what? When you have tens of thousands of dollars worth of ingredients in your freezer or in your refrigerators, those don't just stick around and maintain the freshness for weeks, for months, for quarters, for years, right? Like you all of a sudden are very much between a rock and a hard place of reality. And the left, I would just generalize, was so isolated and so in this bubble that they never really took the concerns of this average person and put it on the same footing as the, I'm not going to call it make-believe concerns, but the lesser concerns that were elevated for some type of social awareness or cultural awareness, right? And we really saw this manifest during the Black Lives Matter riots across the country, where literal cities were burned to the ground. I was in Philadelphia, and just a short walk down the road, there were cars being flipped over and lit on fire, right? And just for people to say, oh, well, this is just how people who are so oppressed and just so underrepresented that they're expressing themselves. You don't think that on the flip side of that goofball mentality, that there are people very much concerned about the safety and security, not just of their communities and their immediate neighborhoods, but also the livelihoods of their families? Darn right, right? And yet you weren't allowed to have a voice that could counter that very much accepted narrative of the day. And I don't know, Joseph, like my gut is telling me that like it is, in a world where common sense feels like it's on life support, it's refreshing to find something that actually works. Just like how voters are finally waking up to the nonsense of performative politics, it might be time for you to wake up to what's happening inside your body. Yeah, and that's where Cardio Miracle comes in. For 2 years now, I've been using it daily. Not because some big pharma exec told me to, but because it actually delivers results. Lower blood pressure? Check. Resting heart rate down? Check. Gym performance way up? You got it. It's packed with science-backed ingredients that support nitric oxide production. Translation: better blood flow, stronger heart, and more energy to actually do the things you care about. Unlike the broken promises from political elites, Cardio Miracle keeps its promises. So if you're done with fluff and you're ready for real results, scan that little QR code over my shoulder or head to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout for 15% off your order. Again, that's code TBNS for 15% off. Because waking up shouldn't stop at politics. Your heart deserves a wake-up call too. And now, let's get back to the show. It is this mentality of the left in general that has permeated far deeper than just the folks who were, in their ivory towers and castles, and had started to drift down more towards the average foot soldier for the Democratic Party. That's kind of my analysis. Am I on point? Am I off base? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you did a good job stringing together a whole bunch of different things that happened over the last maybe decade. I definitely agree with you that there's this kind of snobby progressivism. It kind of reminds me of like Victorian snobbishness. I don't think I'm necessarily equipped for a discussion about COVID. The more I read about COVID, the more I realize I don't know much about it. But I remember during Black Lives Matter, I was a dissenter. I had previously been an open dissenter against diversity and inclusion offices. It was very difficult to challenge these things. But one of the things that I found really frustrating, I really agree with you about, is the sense that there are these very niche concerns that matter to the educated class and people who are very well off. And they talk about, like, there was this controversy at my university when I was a student there. The fence was racist. There was a fence around the school and it was supposedly racist. Well, the Black people who lived in the neighborhood were probably not thinking about any of this. People with regular jobs, the security guards, the janitors, or probably even the Black professors were probably just unconcerned with the fact that there was a fence around the school, which was erected because the school used to be in a very dangerous neighborhood and then the neighborhood gentrified. But the student activists were like, the fence is racist. And the spokes were, they were separate spaces apart from each other on different sides of the school because the fence was built at different times. Maybe the city gave them some extra fence at one point. And they thought that this was a signal to the part of the neighborhood that was darker in color, that they were not wanted. And, it's very, very silly, these very silly niche concerns. And when the Democratic Party embraced this rhetorically, it was very alienating to people. I was just at a Democrat event. I am still a registered Democrat. And, you'd be amazed how many of us are not radical blue hair people. I mean, this is a stereotype that I think we've earned, but I also think is very far from the truth, which is that we're these radical blue haired, screaming activists from Barnard. But I was just at a Democrat event in Manhattan recently. And of course, you go there and you meet many centrists. A lot of Jews who realize they're not far left after October 7th, they'll be like, yes, I thought I was on the far left. And then I realized I was Jewish. And I'm not Jewish, but I'm saying I hear things like this and they realize that they're centrist now and they love Richie Torres. But I'm listening to these different local Democratic politicians speak, and, the radicals, and there still is this fear of questioning them, which I just don't care about. And the radicals will scream about intersectionality or being a black male queer or whatever. And then the centrists will say something like, and we have to stop doing the things that don't work and start doing the things that do. And I'm like, oh my God, say something substantive.
Wait, you're telling me that putting a black square in your Facebook profile picture didn't end racism? What?
Oh, I never did any of that. I found that very, I've never really liked performative stuff, after October 7th, I became very supportive of Israel, but I don't put the star, David on anything. I just
you didn't have the Ukrainian flag next to your profile picture.
No, it's just reason to do this. It is something I've never liked doing. I've never enjoyed virtue signaling, though I am a very colorful person. I was in DC last summer, and I was invited to the bar after NatCon, National Conservatism Conference, which is very, very, very far right. You go there, and it's like, oh, they want to be back in the 50s. They're all wearing black and gray suits, and it's like the 50s, but with more Jews. And I know, right? Very funny. And and I show up in rainbow pants. And, it's interesting how they're not particularly judgmental. I mean, one of the dynamics that I've noticed is that conservatives, and, I'm a centrist Democrat, so I can function in conservative spaces, have been so accepting of me in a way that I feel like the far left hasn't been. I mean,
interesting.
The things the far left has done to me. The only reason I haven't been pushed into the Republican Party is because I'm so revolted by Donald Trump and because I believe in social programs and stuff. But the far left has done very mean things to me. They tried to get me fired from my job. They screamed at me in public. They kicked me out of my house once. I mean, I was living with these two wokeistas, and I explained my politics to them, and they were like, it's fine. But then I honked at a black person.
How dare you?
He parked his car in front of my driveway, and so I honked at him. This was unacceptable, and they were all upset, and they were like, oh my goodness, you honked at a black person. The community is so offended, and all they do is think about how white we are. And so that didn't work out, and they basically kicked me out of the apartment over it. And yet the conservatives, who I think are totally wrong about so many things, nevertheless have never done anything like that to me. So I know I'm very, I see we're both people who can string together the many topics into one very long tangent. So I think it's a good thing I'm on your show.
Likewise, agree. There's been a very big eye-opening kind of life thing for me. That's a really messy way to say. I've moved around a little bit. I was up in upstate New York. It's where I was born and raised. I lived in the southern tier of New York for a little bit as I went to college. Then I moved out to Philadelphia for just shy of a decade for work. And then during COVID, moved out here to Indiana to escape the insanity, right? And to go from one area to the next, it has been very eye-opening to see the way that people interact with those they disagree with, right? In the Northeast specifically, especially in those very blue cities, it was very noticeable of how quick to judge the folks on the left were, which ironically are the exact same folks who are saying, don't you dare judge, right? But on the flip side, the stereotype of this regressive, 1950s mentality of the Republicans or these rural Americans, as I move out to Indiana, it's actually the exact opposite. I'm seeing more more community, more like true neighborliness, right? In this area, because of the fact, and I think it's the very nature that when you look at the more conservative ethics in politics, it is rooted fundamentally in the idea of a strong community, right? Not saying a society in a city where you're spending over half your income on property taxes to help better the community, right? But an actual, like, I'm going to do actions personally to help better my community, right? I see that. And I don't know. Let me ask you this, Joey, because is it a matter of this do-good mentality from the left where they're like, listen, I'm going to vote for these politicians who are going to do all these wonderful highfalutin things versus I'm actually going to go out and put in the sweat equity to make my community better? Is that maybe one of these big issues that people just don't pay attention to?
Well, I mean, my co-partisans do a lot of good for each other and for their cities and towns. I mean, Democrats are pretty good at organizing, and there are good people everywhere who want to help people. So I think that the primary reason that big cities are places where you don't have as much community is people move a lot. There are so many people, and it's very difficult when you have a lot of transplants to have cohesive community. But like, if you look at the people who've been here forever and whose families have lived in the same neighborhoods forever, like in New York, the local Black population, they have a very strong sense of community because they've been in the same place for 100 years, and people stay close to each other.
I mean, Joey, I mean, interrupt, but literally my neighbor in Philadelphia, but my neighbors, it was a 91-year-old and a 96-year-old couple who've been living in their home for 70 years. Like that's the exact type of use case you're identifying here.
And so I think that big cities tend to be places where there's a lot of churning and there are tons of people. So I think that's part of the reason why you don't have as strong a sense of community. I also definitely agree with you that conservative values tend to focus on community and a kind of communitarian sense of the social order. I think that I really would not dismiss a sincere belief in social justice among many Democrats. People who are very involved in organizations. I mean, during the progressive era, when we were sort of recovering from the harm caused by the Gilded Age, horrible inequality, horrible mass urban poverty, corruption, there were many civic organizations that were founded that really revivified our society, and many of them were very focused on social justice, and they were led by liberals and progressives. And so I would not be dismissive of progressive care and concern for other people. I think the reason big cities are places where you don't have as much community is because there's so many people. So I do not want to pathologize progressivism when it does not deserve to be pathologized.
Hey, really quick, can we just laser focus on that? Because I'm wondering, because what you just said actually, I feel it kind of reaffirms my point, is that conservatives, by and large, tend to want to address the things that they can actually make an impact on. Whereas it feels like, you mentioned the big cities, right? I feel that I can't have as much of an impact. Therefore, my impact is my vote for those who, in my theory, can do the most good, despite the actual outcomes showing the opposite. Does that make sense?
Can you
hear me out? Hear me out. So, like, I lived in Philadelphia for like I said, just shy of a decade, and I spent oodles in income tax there. Right? Philadelphia is one of the few cities who actually has their own city income tax. Yeah. I knew when I was spending that money or had that money taken from my paycheck that it was not going to go and benefit me. But the argument was it's going to benefit our schools. It's going to benefit our communities. It's going to make things better. It's more safe, right? And yet during my time, especially during the last bits in Philadelphia, I saw an uptick in gang violence and shootings and just, community violence. I saw an uptick in the surrounding areas just becoming in disrepair. We saw an uptick, not just in kids having a lesser education, in some instances due to COVID, having no education, right? Because the schools were shut down. So there was this argument of we're going to do good with the money that we're collecting, but then from the outcomes, it's almost the exact opposite in many instances, causing more harm than good because the incentive structures don't align. Do you hear what I'm saying there?
Yeah, so in that particular situation, I can understand what you're saying because you're talking about a fairly exceptional period in time where bad ideas or emergencies were hindering the normal functioning of a city or of an entire society. I don't think that's a reason not to have taxes or to necessarily lower the taxes. I mean, I don't know anything about Philadelphia's tax system or how wasteful it is, but I mean, I'm generally someone who thinks that taxes are a good thing, that they should be used responsibly and that we should have like better quality of life and that they should be put toward improving things like public transportation and public schools. So I don't think that liberal interest in kind of like investing in public systems is a bad thing. I just think that terrible ideas about how to do that are bad. Like defund the police was a terrible idea. It's a public service that's absolutely necessary. And we should not have.
Really quick, let's go back to the public transportation piece because I hear you, right? We should have that money go towards improving our infrastructure. Hey, Philadelphia, let's use Philadelphia because it's fun to pick on Philly because I live there. Like, let's use that money to make our subway systems, more efficient and actually, safer and actually make it so it's not a slum in the underground that you're going in and like holding your breath because it literally smells like piss, right? Mm-hmm. When they took the money to do, it was a bus update when I was in Philadelphia. It wasn't to make the buses more safe or more efficient. It was to make the buses more eco-friendly. And that's the thing is that there is the I want to do good with this money. And then what actually happens with this money? So if they were like, hey, let's go ahead and actually, create more efficient buses and open up more bus routes, or, let's start to invest more in our infrastructure to make it better. No, we're going to do the feel good thing of spend our money on buses that are going to have less emissions, but there is no fundamental one-to-one correlation of we are taking this money from you to do good and then a direct outcome that equals that good promise. It turns into something entirely different that was never even on the purview.
Well, I mean, I don't know how that decision was made. I mean, is that something
poorly?
Is that something that Blue Philadelphia, would want? Who made the decision? Was it the bureaucracy? Was it the local council? I mean,
does that matter?
Well, I mean, if the local people are very pro-environment and they want lower emission buses, then I think that that's a decision they should be able to make. I mean, I personally think it's probably a good thing to do that. I think that there's value in doing that. I don't know. I mean, now we're getting to a conversation about climate change and we're getting so far away from talking about election strategy. Since we have about 5 minutes left, do you want to go back into like election strategy? Because
yeah. Let's go back because you're right. And I'm sorry, I started to go.
No, it's okay.
It's not often I get a common sense Democrat in the show.
We're both very rambly people, I can tell.
But no, let's go back to, so we were talking about Newsom. I mentioned before we hit record, the likes of a Stephen A. Smith or an AOC, right? There's very much this, call it the come to Jesus moment on the left. And I'm just going to, generalize for today's conversation, the left, of what we did during 2024 fundamentally didn't work. Not only did it not work, it blew up in our face and it was a complete reversion away from what we were hoping for and instead gave us all the things we didn't want, right? From a left standpoint. So you look at folks like Gavin Newsom and his strategic unawakening, as you outlined in your article here. Like there's that perspective. There's a Stephen A. Smith's going on different shows saying, oh, America's gone too far this direction and we need to bring it back towards some common sense and centrism, right? And then AOC going across the country saying, listen, if you support me, but you voted for Donald Trump, I want to know why, right? There is at least it feels like an admission from folks on the left that this didn't work. So let's talk about strategy. What can the left actually do? And by the way, I actually think that everything does come together because we talk about the buses and stuff, right? there was this mentality of we should promote these feel good, do good types of things, but people want real, tangible results that immediately make their lives, their neighborhoods better. And I guess so my question to you is, who out there in the Democratic Party can actually build something like that, build some bridges, and at the same point in time, from a Democrat standpoint, kind of maintain the narrative?
Well, I mean, I personally love Richie Torres from the Bronx. I don't think he's quite ready to run for president yet. Ruben Gallego from Arizona is also a centrist. He talks about how the Democratic Party needs to stop telling people that being rich is bad. He has a lot of Latino voters. He's Latino, and he says, look, you want to go get your traquitos, which is like truck, and get rich? That's what a lot of Latino guys want to do. They want to go get the traquito and go get rich, probably become a contractor or something. Go do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And this idea that we should be ashamed of money or ashamed of our culture or that we should have this discourse that, frankly, most working class people are unconcerned with wokeness. They don't care about identity politics. They care about their lives, and they sort of see it on TV or on social media, and they're kind of like, it's just it's alienating. It's not something they're invested in, and so it's not interesting to people. So what the Democratic Party needs to do is, I think, get away from all of that. I think they do need to stand their ground and standing up for their values, but their values should be standing up for what average people want in their daily lives. And I think that the Democratic Party still probably can do that. I'm trying to think, who is this other? I think Pete Buttigieg could probably do this. I mean, he's a good communicator. People like him. He's not a drag queen. He's just a gay guy.
Yeah, and he's been going on those different podcasts, actually reaching different voters who aren't just already singing from the same sheet of music.
Yes, exactly. So, and I think I would like to see Richie Torres run for president at some point. He's a really good example of someone who moved from the far left to the center. And I think he's a really good communicator. He's very charismatic. And I think that what we need is people who can communicate. You might have people who are great politicians behind the scenes, but are terrible at public communication. And this is a charisma era, and you need charismatic people. I don't want Gavin Newsom to be the president. He's too slimy, and I don't know if he could win against J.D. Vance. But I think that we just need communicators to talk about quality of life issues.
Joey, this has been one of my favorite conversations, and frankly, I'll tell you why. I know I exclaimed it, but I don't get many like Democrats who have common sense, who are willing to engage in a conversation like this, because there very much still is this like red team, blue team mentality that has permeated a lot of folks and on all sides of the aisle, mind you, right? Like I think it's much more prevalent on the left of like saying we shouldn't talk to certain people, but that's starting to go away. And I think it's going away back to the crux of the conversation that we started here today, because strategically speaking, what that mentality has bred in the past has been electoral failures, right? And if the Democratic Party, not just from an electoral standpoint, but from a just overarching approval standpoint, I mean, the ratings are in the low 30s, I think, right now for your average American supporting the Democratic Party. Like that's a big red flag, because that number back during the Obama administration was like in the high 40s, low 50%, I think it was. So you're seeing that more and more people are not buying what the Democratic Party is selling. And, this show, we built this show around the ideas of how do we sell our ideas by meeting people where they're at, specifically on the issues they care about. And with that, how do we line up our messaging, our communication to make sure that we're presenting things in a way that is most receptive to that average person? And it feels like, and the data I believe shows that the Democratic Party by and large has neglected that over the past few decades, and in pursuit of going after who they want to sing their song to, right? It is the person who looks and thinks and speaks just like me. So when you're sitting in your driveway, just upset that somebody is trying to park their car in front of your driveway, right? Like that's just a normal reaction. But the wokies that you were with were like, oh no, how dare you, Joey, because it was a black man that parked his car in front of you. Now you are
who doesn't care and goes on.
Exactly. And now you're the enemy, right? And that like if it's Anakin Skywalker, right? In Revenge of the Sith. If you're not with me, you're my enemy, which I know was obviously a play of George Bush. If you're not with us, you're with the terrorists, right? Like that was where that came from. But this whole, only Sith deal in absolutes. I'm sorry, the left has become the Sith of the American political experiment because they all deal in absolutes. Oh, you don't carry the LGBTQ flag, you must hate gay people. Oh, you don't say you want open borders, you must hate immigrants. Oh, you don't want, or you say you want I don't know, just name the issue. It's always going back to, oh, well, it's because you hate this other person. It has become the Kathy Newmanism of politics, and it is exhausting. So what you're saying is, no, what I'm saying is the exact thing I'm saying. I don't want somebody parking in front of my driveway, not letting me get out. I don't want, people shooting each other down the street because, that's just, well, that's just how they are. No, what the hell are we doing here, right? Like, let's be able to objectively look at issues and say, this is objectively good and this is objectively bad. And I think that's where the Democratic Party has really lost so many average people, because if you're not able to say the obvious things out loud that are true, how can I trust you as a voter to say the things that I need to hear that are true when it's uncomfortable, right? When it's not convenient. And that's where I think your average person, especially going back to this past election cycle, we're like, yep, I'm done, but I'll get off my soapbox here, Joey. I know we're over time, and I appreciate you sticking with me. Hit us with it. Where can folks go ahead if they want to continue this conversation with you, and also learn more, right? And by the way, I'm going to say this right now, Joey, you will be back on the show, because I don't get many folks who are willing to engage in these conversations.
Please invite me back when I'm back.
Yeah, and we just had tip of the iceberg here today, so floor is yours. Sorry.
Nice camera quality in the future, but yeah, you can listen to the In Response podcast. If you just look up In Response, Joey T. McFadden, you can go on my Substack. It's also an Apple podcast. It should be on Spotify soon if it isn't already. I've had on guests like Nick Gillespie, Brett Stevens, Heather McDonald. You can also look up Joey T. McFadden, Fair Observer, to read my art criticism. You can follow me on Instagram at joeyt.mcfadden. And my X handle is, I don't remember it off the top of my head, so let's wait for X to load. And my X handle is Joseph T. McFad 2. So that's my last name without the N. Instead, it's the number 2. But that's where you can find me. That's where you can follow me. Please go ahead and take a listen to my show.
Good stuff, Joey. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I love these conversations. They get me fired up. And also, like, just elephant in the room. We've done 975 episodes of the Brian Nichols Show. And I would say 2/3, 3/4 of those shows have all been people saying, like, yeah, I agree. Like, I like to have the discourse, because this is how we actually make things better, and we find common ground. We can move things forward, but also we can look at things in the past and objectively agree, like, this worked, this didn't work, and it starts with being able to have these conversations in good faith. So, Joey, I'm so thankful you joined the show today. I am really looking forward to future conversations. I will include all those links to your social media here in our show notes. So, folks, if you want to continue the conversation with Joey, please go ahead and do so. And by the way, if you want to go ahead and find me, you can find me on X, Facebook, and Instagram at B Nichols Liberty. As for the Brian Nichols Show, we are a podcast, but also a video show. So head over to your favorite podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music. Search the Brian Nichols Show. Of course, hit subscribe. Also, the Brian Nichols Show over on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and X. And we are live streaming the show on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern. We changed the date from Wednesday to Thursdays for that middle show, because that middle show is now on the Lions of Liberty feed. I am officially part of the Lions of Liberty network. So and we're doing an exclusive episode there on our Thursday shows. So if you want to go ahead and check out that show, it'll be over on the Lions of Liberty podcast feed. As for the Brian Nichols Show in general, though, I'm still doing this show Mondays and Fridays on our original feed here for the Brian Nichols Show. So, of course, hit subscribe for both so you miss a single time we go live. Joey, thank you for joining us here on the show. Any final thoughts as we wrap things up today?
Maybe next time we can fight about Trump.
Let's do that. That'll be a good time. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Joey McFadden. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.